What's this? Learning drugs? They're illegal, matey. I'm afraid you're in very serious, grave, deep trouble, Lister. Where did you get them? I want names, I want places, I want dates.
Arnold Rimmer, his locker, this morning.
It's one thing to write a pilot and people go, well, what happens in future episodes? And you go, oh, well, they'll have all sorts of adventures, they'll be travelling through space and just amazing things will happen. And people go, oh, okay, fine. And then when you actually get the commission and you think, hang on, we've killed all humans off, we've got this no alien rule, no monsters rule, what are we going to do?
We did the flashback partly to open it up a bit because it was getting a bit claustrophobic. I mean, it was a prison with not even any guards in it.
But I do remember thinking the show would be much better if we brought these guys in all the time. How are we going to sustain me, Rimmer, Holly and the cat for any length of time?
And we also thought, you know, in a science fiction-y kind of way, you can get back to the original cast. And I think we had it in mind that we might do that quite a lot.
Craig had a habit of smoking the props, so that by the time he came to do the scene, he'd go in, the box would be there. Joanna, where's the cigarettes? And I got fed up with this because it looked like it was me that I'd forgotten to give him the props. And then he comes up with I think it was him that came up with the idea of putting the cigarettes in his hat. Helen would come and go, can I have a cigarette? A packet of cigarettes. I said, why? Oh, Craig wants a cigarette. I said, tell him, you know, Craig, there's the shops outside. Go. And she'd go off.
Candy? Denmark forever? Is this Peterson's arm, Holly? Coming out of makeup with two completely different arms, one of which, of course, was Peterson's arm, and behaved like Peterson's arm, was incredibly odd.
Tell him to stop it!
What is this? Cabaret? Entertainment while you eat? I'm sure even at drama school they don't say, right, there you are, one arm is yours and the other arm isn't. The other arm belongs to someone who hates your guts. How's it going to perform?
I'll have you know I chose this face out of the billions available because it happened to be the face of the greatest and most prolific lover who ever lived.
Rob and Doug and I had made a decision that it would be better to see Norman rather than just hear him because he's got a great lugubrious face.
Initially the money was low because it was a voiceover, so they can get away with paying you peanuts for that.
Norman had been banging on right from the start. He's saying, get my face on screen. That's the money.
So I kept moaning and whinging about this. And I said, why have I got to do a voiceover in a TV show? Why can't you see this face? And why can't this computer called Holly look like this bloke here? By the time we'd recorded the third episode of the first series, it had been agreed that we would see Holly and we'd go and reshoot some of the bits for the first and second and third episodes.
With Norman, what we had to do is suddenly had to find a position, so as he was in vision, where we could get a camera. We couldn't dedicate one camera to him all the time. So cameras had to get in and out, and he had to be in a black area. We crushed the pictures very slightly to lose all the blacks and pushed his signal through a clipper keying system, which broke up his face slightly.
They thought a computer, oh yeah, well it won't have a normal face, will it? It'll be pixelated. And I think they also wanted to do something with the voice, making it a bit, I don't know, Doctor Who-ish, like a Dalek, or I don't know what they had in mind, putting some echo on it. Ed wanted to put some echo on it, reverb on it. And I said, no, that defeats the whole thing. Have it as me, just me, I'm the computer.
The original requirement for the scutters was that they should be a shoebox-sized device with an arm coming out of the top of it. Well, I think I was given originally 2 weeks to build them in, but they actually took nearer 3 months. And that was only possible because of the strike.
And these are remote-controlled robots, which again, you know, in those days was quite unusual. You know, it was still things that people went, ooh, at it on Tomorrow's World.
I'm convinced that Peter Ragg was the only one in the studio who really believed in their ability to perform well.
It was made of such scrap iron that every time we operated them, the radio control was interfered with by all the moving metal. So you would tell it to go, and you were unable to tell it not to go afterwards because it would just go all over the place. And there was one notorious occasion where Chris Barry and Craig Charles had just been dealing with them, And just as the word cut was uttered from the gallery, the head simply fell off one of these cutters.
And I seem to remember Craig one day coming in and saying, what are we doing now, man? And I said, I think we're doing a scene with the Scutters. And he went, the Scutters? I've got time for a fag.
Bastards. Bastards. Now, if we'd done Red Dwarf after we'd done Robot Wars, the Scutters would have been fantastic.
Down, down, slowly. Aha! Now very, very, very slowly forward.
Ow, me eye!
They really, they could grip, but they could only grip in a most light way. And even if they did grip something, the radio interference would simply mean that they would twitch and drop whatever it was that they had succeeded in gripping. And of course we also had a glove puppet scutter for the more refined movements.
Radio control technology was not very advanced, and to try and make a scooter go in a straight line, just forget it. Driving into furniture, a bit like me in the dress rehearsal, really.
The Scutters were named. They had a two-storey house on wheels with a loft space where all their controls were hidden, and the batteries and the chargers and all the bits and pieces that went with them. And the box was blazoned with a little brass plaque that announced that Mercedes and Benz lived inside.
I am your god. Okay.
Turn this into a woman.
To be frank, Waiting for God is my least favourite of all the Red Dwarf shows. I haven't watched it in a good many years, and I really got no plans to in the future, just because, you know, we were struggling at the time, I think, to find, you always do this with the show, to find out where the heart of the show is, where the meat and potatoes of it are. And we were sort of very much at the time wrapped up in the mythos that we'd created from the pilot. And we were sort of exploring that, and mercifully we managed to give that up in the following episode and get on with the thing.
My science fiction knowledge was all movie-based, and Rob was much more TV and literature-based. So Rob felt it was very important that we did the whole backstory of the cats, because that's what you would have done in a novel.
When I heard, oh, it's going to be the cat episode, I was kind of expecting more. You know, I think that they could have pushed the boat out more as far as making the cat episode as big as the cat character.
The idea was very appealing, which was, here is this very, very ordinary, ungodlike guy who discovers he is this dying guy's god and then behaves like his god on his deathbed. And it seemed like a really smart idea. Not funny, but just a great idea. And that's why we went for it. And then, of course, as soon as you get into it, it was just turgid and difficult. And you've got the golden donut and all that stuff that just looked terrible.
When you write, you know, you go into the bowels of the ship, you imagine this kind of alien movie, huge chamber, and, you know, you get a stock room with some cobwebs in it.
Oh, I love that set. It was a disused cargo area. I liked it. It was so dusty and grotty. It was lovely.
I mean, the spaceship was supposed to be huge. The visuals at the start of the show showed a whopping great spaceship, and the set wasn't that big, and it was, especially the studio, it was quite a small studio in Manchester. So by giving you spots of light and pools of darkness, you let the brain work and pretend it's further and bigger, and the colours were just random colours, just to break it up.
Noel Coleman, because I remember him from black and white war movies and things like that. He was an old, sort of, big old 50s screen idol. But he was knocking on. And to be fair to him, couldn't remember a blasted thing.
Well-respected English actor who prided himself on knowing his lines, and then we'd change them all at the last minute to make his life hell.
Suppleness, suppleness. Slobby. Slobby. Slobby, 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 slobby.
Slobbiness, for God's sake, whatever that may mean, slobbiness. All these years I kept the faith. I wore the holy custard stain and the sacred gravy mark. I renounced coolness and chose the righteous path of stubbleness. And then it was terrible because he had this big silly hat on, didn't he? And he had to fall on the bed and die, and the hat bumped and cracked the bridge of his nose, and the bridge of his nose was all bleeding and all that. But do you notice about Noel? He had different coloured hands because he was a cat. So you see, I wonder how many nipples he had.
I always wanted to see a scene where you saw loads of cats, you know, so you didn't have to sort of try and tell the story through one cat. 2 arcs flew off, one lot are out there somewhere, and I always wanted them to find that arc. You know, that would have been the cat episode.
Pause and safe, come in. Come on, come in.
Don't ask me how I learned to do that. Don't even ask me how I found out I could do it. It's just... why? And when I fall down, you can see this big trail of spit.
We got that from rehearsals. There was a door in the rehearsal room which had a bit of glass in it. And he would go outside the door and go, here, watch this, and do that. And we went, and so in it went.
They must have looked something like a roast chicken. It's the bloody garbage pod.
Why didn't you tell me, Lister? It's the garbage pod!
I got hired to do the warm-up for Red Dwarf. And when I came in to talk to them, they said, and we got a part for you.
Oh, you're not busy eating toast, are ya?
And I did a reading, and I did it really deadpan, you know, want some toast, really deadpan. And I just completely cracked everybody up. And then the strike happened. And then by the time it all came around again, they called me up and they said, come and do the warm-up. By that time, I had decided as a career move that I wouldn't do warm-ups anymore because you're kind of always the bridesmaid, never the bride. But they still let me do the toaster. And I think that they got Tony Hawks to be the warm-up man.
I didn't like the toaster because I saw him as a threat. I saw him as competition. Hello, someone's doing jokes as well as me. A bloody toaster. I'm the computer. I'm the funny one in that area. Get out of here.
During the course of rehearsals, I had this really deadpan thing. Somebody, and I can't imagine why anybody would ever think this, somebody came in and said, you know, I think he sounds a lot like Norman. And I thought, well, so that's when they put this computerized voice on top of the whole thing.
I also built for it a little sound-to-light unit, which was a microphone and a little circuit that was strapped to the voiceover artist's microphone on the side of the stage. And so when he spoke his lines, my little microphone would pick it up and flash the light in the toaster.
One of my favorite days ever was my first day. I showed up at this Red Dwarf, and I didn't know anybody. I knew Norman. I had worked in a comedy club with Norman. And I showed up, and people didn't pay much attention to me. There were people working hard, and so I was just the toaster, you know. And we went for lunch, and I kind of sat at the end of this table, and I was kind of sitting by myself, and all of a sudden, every famous person I ever worked with walked in the door. Rory Bremner walked in. Ronnie Corbett walked in, who I'd been on tour with Ronnie Corbett years ago. Paul Daniels, Ali Bongo, they all came over, sat around me. Lenny Henry and Robbie Coltrane, who I'd never met, but like, so all of a sudden, and everyone was over there going, who the hell is this toaster guy? And they were the only famous people I knew, and they were all in that room. And so after lunch, man, I got a lot more respect.
You're my confidence. I'm all the things you associate with confidence, King. You're my paranoia.
Isn't that a urine stain on the front of your trousers?
I mean, Rob was right in terms of not meeting an alien of the week or a monster of the week or landing on a planet, is that it would force us to come up with something original. And what it forced us to do was, instead of looking outward, it made us look inward into the characters.
We're both fascinated by psychology and what makes us all tick, and we both nearly did it at university. I say nearly, we actually went and were supposed to be doing it. But that we were very interested in that kind of thing. Confidence and paranoia kind of did tap into a theme we were going to go back to, though we didn't know it. of the psyche made real.
You can do anything. Anything.
I think Paul Jackson recommended Craig Ferguson. I didn't know him.
When I say nobody calls me faggot, Craig calls me faggot.
Craig was a very confident person, you know, he was right for that role. He was great.
He is confident, he is energetic, he's big, he's happy.
Apart from an actor, he's a stand-up comedian, very good one, with that kind of Scottish bigness. Not bigness in size, but in performance.
Oh, look! You've got a body like a coat hanger. How can you make an evening suit shit? How can I make an evening suit shit?
Why do Scottish people do brilliant American accents? But have you noticed that? Scottish people do brilliant American accents.
There was a couple of people we auditioned for that part, and one of them was Mac McDonald. But we thought Mac would have been a great confidence, but we didn't want to lose him as the captain. So maybe at one stage, Craig Ferguson could have become the captain, who knows?
Again, like Craig Ferguson for confidence, for paranoia, Lee was absolutely perfect. You know, if anyone's going to remind you of that spot you have, you know, it's just that character.
Lee, I knew a lot, was a great friend. He'd been in The Young Ones, and also he did the warm-up in The Young Ones, and he was fantastic.
Lee Corn's another person on the circuit, comedian, who was in a group called The Wow Show. He was right for playing miserable, you know, paranoid people. It was perfect.
That's me. That's how I was. Yes, that's right. He was the opposite of Craig. Healthy, you know, white teeth, tan, larger than life, and this guy was sort of just really into himself and nasty and creepy. And again, typecasting, I dare say.
His whole comic being, if you like, is sort of trades on being a small man.
He used to host the Comedy Store, and he played a character where he would come on as a sort of rather unpleasant MC, and as the show went on, he would come with more and more damage done to him. So the next time he'd introduce would be some blood coming out of his nose, inferring that somebody had smacked him in the face backstage. And by the end of it, he's covered in bruises, there's blood everywhere, and, you know, that's the kind of character he played, where he was just irritating and everybody wanted to beat him senseless.
He was a very serious contender for Rimmer at the time. Not at that time, but obviously when we were casting. And so we were on the lookout for a meaty part for him.
I saw it recently and thought, yeah, you know, quite enjoyed what I did. I mean, I looked so ghastly. I mean, they didn't have to do much makeup on me to make me look sort of that drawn. I thought obviously how young and thin I was, but yeah, I was quite pleased with that. I don't. Sometimes you can look at yourself and go, oh dear, but you know, I was pleased with that.
A gantry was, to say the very least, jury-rigged around that scene, and we quite literally stood up there with buckets of fish that had been bought that day from the fish market, and we left these in the cooling environment of a Manchester studio for most of the day.
So they'd been up there all day and just basically part cooking. So you had this sort of semi-cooked fish smell, which, you know, frozen fish smell is all right, and the cooked fish smell is all right, but the in-between one...
And then I had to take a shot of a live fish on the floor, flapping about, like they do when and I remember taking a shot of it going, I haven't quite got enough. And Paul Jackson, he who is so tough, went, that's enough! Put the fish back in the bucket! Wouldn't have happened with an actor. They'd have been left to flap about until they were dead.
The Mayor of Warsaw spontaneously combusted. This was simply a rollback and mix camera gag.
You do a lock-off. So the guy comes in, he rings the bell, and at the particular point, we cut, ask the man to move, and then you fire off an explosion. You get his clothes, you hang them on a wire, and you drop the clothes. And then always for good measure, you take a shot of the clothes on the floor landing on a heap. And that's how you blow somebody up.
Please note a dust storm is approaching. Ship exterior is now out of bounds. All airlocks are being automatically sealed.
We had to provide a sort of POV shot of the dust storm in space approaching the ship. So at the time, I think we'd been messing around with water tanks for some nuclear explosions for aliens. We'd had a 4-foot square tank made up, which we filled with water. and at the back of the tank we have a little probe which we squirt Jay's fluid through, and that goes towards lens and it spreads out through the water and looks like some kind of gas cloud or whatever you like to call it. And then we basically chopped off the back end of the Red Dwarf spaceship and stood it on the floor on its end, and then dropped vermiculite, little particles of mica, lots of dust in it. And as we tracked the camera down, the Red Dwarf spaceship appeared to be flying left to right.
You don't need anything, King. You're the king. You're crazy.
If you're on the outside of Red Dwarf, it's an enormous ship, isn't it? And it's very difficult to give that impression really in the studio. And I sent the buyer out to get some rolls of paper, you know, the big rolls. And I got our painter, Bert, sort of poured some red paint on.
And you know what? It wasn't grey. It was red because it was the outside of Red Dwarf. We got away from the grey, and all of a sudden everyone was like, had a song in their heart and a smile on their face.
Paul designed the set against the sound gallery wall, and the stairs that they came down were the actual stairs from the sound gallery.
Of course, the Vision Mixer sort of managed to double that up by pushing a few buttons.
And drop them in on the edit into a bigger shot, and then the close-up was actually done on the studio floor.
Craig Confidence was simply directed to walk along the gallery and position himself in a specific point, and at that point we could cut and lock off. We then took him out, and it took quite a long time to do this change because we then had to take a panel away and bring an air mortar up behind and charge it and load it with debris and put in an empty spacesuit which was connected to the air mortar. And once everything was ready, we simply rolled the cameras again and fired the button, and everything went bang at the same time.
The secret is to make the explosion happen very, very close to the edit. So you have normal person, explosion straight away afterwards. So you don't see much of the dummy.
And that was a great special effect where it took it, exploded, and I got injured. I got hit by bits of things, so when you see me falling like that, that's because I caught a little bit, you know what I mean? All my own stunts.
The original ending to Confidence and Paranoia was Lister gets Holly to power down unnecessary resources, and he has enough power then to generate another hologram, and it was going to be Kachansky, and it was because it was the sort of the final show of the first season. We thought, oh well, you know, it's kind of a bit of a cliffhanger. We want people to think what's going to happen next. It was only after the hiatus, and we were sort of sitting in the office talking about the series, and I said, you know what we should have done at the end of that? We should have brought back Rimmer instead. And Doug said, you're right, let's write it. And I say, you're mad. We've got 6 shows. We're not going to get paid anymore. Why would we do that? And but we did, and it turns out that knocked out the second show we'd written, which featured 2 listers, but it had the same theme, which is, you know, how would you get on with yourself?
And that new show was Me Squared, which obviously had the benefit of what we'd seen in rehearsals, and I'm sure the shows would have continued to get stronger, and we would have knocked out at least Waiting for God and probably at least one more if we'd had just a few more weeks. But unfortunately we didn't spend that summer as wisely as we might have done.
Do you honestly think I put Kachansky's disc in Kachansky's box where any munchkin could find it? You think you had it bad before, Lister. Now you've got it in stereo, baby. Welcome aboard, Rimsey. A pleasure to be here, you old munchkin, you. Now, okay, we'll do it again, and we'll just saying the line is going to be too difficult to do. Everything tickety-boo? Absolutely what, Mr. Rimmer. I'll be along with lickety-split. Carry on. What a guy.
By the end of that first series, Rob and Doug's imagination was on a roll, and I think that was why Me Squared was so important, because within 6.5 hours they'd learnt and they'd had the confidence to put into action, and they'd got a crew and cast who could deliver. And Me Squared, I think, was a very important step on the way of thinking we can go anywhere we actually can do anything we damn well want.
The split screen work in Me Squared was actually some of the most exciting stuff we did.
You rehearse a scene and somebody else plays him, stands in for him. Quite often it'd be me, and then you do the other half and he plays himself, and then I'll be the other half of that, and then sometimes I'd even do that in the studio.
The star jumps together, that was the physically draining part, you know, having to do, if something goes wrong, you've got to do more takes and more takes on top of that, and it's got to marry in with the other set of star jumps you've already done, so everything was going to be twice.
I think we played him first time round back so that he could see himself on the monitor, so he could catch up with himself doing it.
This is fantastic. This is what I always dreamed of. Shut up. To do something completely different, which is work with yourself and work to a track that you've already laid down, you know, you really need a director who's completely on top of the game, and Ed By on that day was absolutely there with it.
Better watch what you say about my mother.
Now grow up, Mr. Gazpacho!
Hold it there, love.
I said, Mr. Gazpacho!
Which I don't need my script in this, do I?
It was interesting. It was hard work. You had to concentrate. You had to sort of stand in the correct position and not lean over like that, which I'd mastered perfectly. It's weird because you're acting against nobody. You know, you're not getting any back. You know, which happens quite a lot when you're acting with Chris anyway.
We had a lot more scenes in it that were involved two rimmers, but Paul took us to one side in his friendly kind of mafia way, said that we better cut out half of them because they were giving Ed too much of a nightmare. He couldn't possibly accomplish it in the time available to him, and we reluctantly we did.
Can I do that again?
Paul's firm hold of a rehearsal room was very well demonstrated by his famous Italian runs.
He'd rehearse the half-hour script in 5 minutes. You'd forget the meaning of the line, just line, really fast, really fast, really fast.
Hence the Italian, it's like...
And it sounds mad when you're doing it, but I tell you what, you bloody know the lines at the end of the day. You can't catch people out because it's, you know, boys are competitive. And it became just like a parlour game, really.
And every time they get it wrong, you make them go back until they get it right. And then, I mean, it's a well-known technique. He just happened to do it in the style of a Nazi, that's all.
If you screwed up in any way, whoever screwed up was responsible for us starting from the beginning again. Or it might be, if he's feeling good, it might be just go to the beginning of that scene.
It's just like being back at school. But the headmaster's dropped in, and you've got Ed sitting there sort of going, I told you, you should learn your lines, guys. You're expected to be off the books. And, of course, Paul's sitting there, and the eyes seem to be getting wider, and the lip, he seems to be biting his lip even more firmly. And then, of course, there's the screech of the chair, sometimes flying back at high velocity, and he stands up and says, guys, you've got to learn your lines. You've got to know your lines. And then, just when the veins start to sort of push through the neck, then you kind of know you're in trouble.
But I read mine because I was on auto cue anyway.
So when you did have a hangover, or when you did like this weird laugh that came out of nowhere, because you thought, where's the funniness in that bit? That's not funny. What are you laughing for? You couldn't get put off because he was so well versed and so well drilled with the lines.
The speed read was the thing that actually I had learnt from the Manchester crew on Young Ones, Rick, Ben, Aid, so I assume it was a technique they had done there. And I've always liked it, and I've used it throughout. I haven't directed for 10, 12 years now, but I've always liked it as the director.
What it did make you do was concentrate fully on, you know, because it's easy to sort of be doing the run and then sort of, you know, wander off and, oh, that's a nice light.
Often, Danny would have one line, page 17, and they get to page 17, and then Danny would have forgotten his line, and then you'd have to go back to the beginning. And what that promotes is hatred for fellow cast members, rather than, hey, we're really up for this, and, you know, we're all lads, and this is a bit of a drinking game.
Danny could do other things apart from act and dance and be funny and be late. There was other things he could do, and one of them was he could roller skate really well.
I was in Starlight Express did the year on the roller skates. So by then I was like, they were like walking in shoes.
Danny came in, showed us how he could roller skate. The next minute he's roller skating in a set. Do you know, I think health and safety probably couldn't do that now. You'd probably have to mat in the roller skates later.
Anything where I could show the audience something, you know, unusual that I can add to the character's string of things that he could do. I'd learnt to juggle when I was doing the musical Barnum at the London Palladium. Juggling's quite catty as well, you know, they do that with ping pong balls on the floor, you know.
You can unicycle as well, you know. We haven't used that yet. I couldn't find a point of unicycling, but he can unicycle.
10 3/4 centimetres! Do you know what? Someone had chewed that gum, blown that bubble, then I had to put it in my mouth. Because they tried with me at first. Another skill I was late developing. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't even get even a semi big. I couldn't even get a semi bubble on.
This is a Jordax, by the way.
One of the important things, and Doug stressed this a lot, was we didn't want to make it. We didn't want to make contemporary references because it would date the show, which did mean. You know, inventing cartoon characters that they could talk about, Muggs Murphy.
Well, we made a bit of a cartoon with Muggs running along shooting things, I think. We had to shoot bits of it so that you see Lister watching clips of it. But with all these things, you can only afford that much. And you could only see that much. So that's how long you had.
Very quiet, please. Recording this time.
If Ed Bye was sharing a room with Ed Bye, yeah, God, I'd hate him. I really wouldn't get on with him. I'd have to kill him.
If I had to live with me, we'd get on fine, I think, you know, because we like each other. We're nice people.
It would be fine channel surfing. We would get on. But apart from that, I don't know.
It depends which me I'd have to live with. The charming, schmoozy, hi, how are you? Let's have a drink me. That would be good. The, if you don't do this now, that wouldn't be quite so good.
No way. One would, if Danny John Jules lived with Danny John Jules, one of them would be murdered.
If there's two of you, surely you'd think the same and get on. But it would, I don't know, cost twice as much and to eat and stuff, and I don't know. It'd drive you crazy, wouldn't it, if you had another one of you?
If I lived with myself, I'd probably drive myself mad, actually.
I'm just really glad that I've got a tolerant family who can live with me.
After all those years, only another normal Abbott sitting beside you, hanging around, you tell them to bugger off. I say, no, I can't deal with this, go away, there's just me and that's it. You don't work in show business, do you, by any chance?
No, you don't want to live with me. But I'd make you toast in the morning.